What if it's not about what you do, but what you are? Have you ever locked eyes with a complete stranger and watched them look away too quickly? Like something about you, something they couldn't explain, made them uneasy even if you hadn't said a word, as if your presence alone challenged something they weren't ready to face? Maybe you've been told you're intense, that you're too much, that your vibe feels heavy or your silence feels loud. You wonder why. You weren't even trying. Some people carry an energy that pierces deeper than they realize. A psychic weight, not because they're trying to dominate a room, but because they see it, because their presence exposes what others would rather keep buried. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we disown, repress, and deny. And when someone walks into our lives embodying those very traits we've locked away, we don't praise them, we fear them. You may not realize it, but your aura is a walking confrontation. You represent something others avoid within themselves. And so, without knowing why, they pull away. They misunderstand you. They may even resent you. This isn't about being popular. It's about being awake. And there's a cost to that, because in a world where people wear masks to survive, the one who sees through illusions becomes dangerous. This video isn't about how to make people like you. It's about the 7 signs your aura makes people uncomfortable. Not because you're wrong, but because you're real. And that kind of truth, it doesn't blend in. It unsettles. It rattles. It's not meant to be accepted. It's meant to wake people up. See through masks. There's a particular kind of discomfort that people feel. Not when they're judged, but when they're seen. Most interactions in life are built on silent agreements. I won't question your mask if you don't question mine. It keeps the peace. It maintains the illusion. But what happens when someone walks into the room and doesn't play along? You notice things, not just what people say, but what they mean. The smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the rehearsed laugh, the way their voice shakes slightly when discussing success. You catch the tension between their words and their energy. You sense the contradiction, and suddenly, the room feels colder. They don't fear you because you're cruel. They fear you because you see through them. You've ever felt like your presence unsettles people without even trying? Stay with me. The next signs will reveal why your energy speaks louder than words, and why the world isn't ready for people like you. Carl Jung called this outer mask the persona, the social costume we wear to function in society. It's not fake necessarily, but it's curated, polished, safe. Behind it hides our shadow. The truth we fear will make us unlovable. When your presence pierces that facade, it's like turning on a light in a room full of dust. Everything gets exposed, and most people aren't ready for that. You might not even speak. You might just look. But that look carries weight. It carries the unspoken message. I see what you're trying to hide. And that's more threatening than any insult. You become a psychological disruptor. In school, at work, in relationships. You've probably noticed how quickly the temperature changes when you stop playing along. When you ask the question that wasn't supposed to be asked. When you point out the contradiction. Or worse, when you say nothing and let the silence do the talking. You weren't trying to make anyone uncomfortable, but when your soul refuses to lie, it challenges those who survive by pretending. Your aura isn't loud, it's honest, and honesty is terrifying in a world addicted to illusion. Comfortable in silence. There's a reason people fear silence. It reveals things they're not ready to hear. Most of society is addicted to noise. The constant scroll of headlines, the hum of background chatter, the endless distractions we call entertainment. Not because people enjoy them, but because they need them. To escape, to forget, to drown out the internal noise they've spent their entire lives avoiding. And then there's you. You sit in silence without twitching. You don't fill the space with empty words. You let the stillness breathe. And that somehow becomes louder than any scream. Your presence isn't aggressive, it's just there. Calm, anchored, unmoved. But in a world where identity is built on reaction, your non-reaction feels hostile. People can't place you. You don't play into their drama, their bait, their emotional turbulence. You remain still. And in that stillness, they see themselves. Not the curated self, but the raw one, the anxious one, the one they've been trying to silence. Carl Jung spoke of the introverted sage, the one who turns inward to explore the depths of their mind, not to escape the world, but to understand it. This archetype doesn't seek attention. It doesn't dominate a room with charisma. It simply is. And that quiet self-possession can feel like judgment to those who are fragmented inside. Your aura doesn't scream, it listens, it watches, and that alone can feel threatening. Because when someone is deeply present, they become a mirror. And most people aren't ready to look. Society teaches performance. Speak louder, move faster, never pause. Because if you pause, you might hear the truth. And if you hear the truth, you might change. That's the real fear. Your silence disrupts the performance. Your calm exposes their chaos. Your ability to be still, truly still, without needing approval or validation, that is a rare form of power. And power, especially when quiet, makes people nervous. You're not silent because you're weak. You're silent because you don't need noise to be felt. Trigger hidden insecurities. There's a certain gravity that follows those who've suffered and survived, not just physically, but psychologically. You've walked through fire, not once, but many times. And you didn't just endure it, you absorbed it. You turned pain into perspective, wounds into wisdom, grief into insight, and now it lingers in your presence, like a charged silence after a storm. You carry weight, not bitterness, not drama, depth. And that's what unsettles people. They feel it in how you speak, with careful words and long pauses, in how you listen, not to respond, but to understand, in how you move, steady, as if chaos has already made its home in you and been tamed. Most people haven't done this work. They run from pain, numb it with distractions, hide it behind personas. But you integrated it. You didn't just survive the darkness, you befriended it. And that shows. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole. Not perfect, not pure, but whole. It means confronting the shadow, the unconscious, the trauma. It means descending into the depths of the self and returning with something true. Your aura holds the echo of that journey, and that terrifies people who've spent their lives avoiding their own. You remind them of what they haven't faced, what they've buried, what they fear would destroy them if it ever came to the surface. So they say you're intense, or distant, or difficult. But really, they mean you're deep. And depth feels dangerous to those still clinging to the surface. You don't need to speak of your past. People feel it. They feel the quiet resilience, the unshakable core, the kind of presence that only comes from facing yourself and choosing not to flinch. You are not intimidating because you're wounded. You're intimidating because you healed and didn't lose your truth in the process. And that kind of healing is a force people don't yet know how to understand. Wounded wisdom. You were never made to fit the mold. And deep down, you've always known it. You ask questions that others avoid, not out of rebellion, but out of clarity, curiosity, a hunger for truth that doesn't settle for prepackaged answers. You challenge the script, the one society hands out at birth and expects everyone to recite without hesitation. And people feel that. Long before you speak, your presence whispers, "I think for myself." And that's enough to make others uneasy, because most people aren't living by their own beliefs. They're performing them, mimicking what's acceptable, echoing what's trending, holding convictions not because they explored them, but because they were told it's the right thing to believe. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, the inherited layer of the psyche where instincts, archetypes, and myths shape us from beneath awareness. It's what allows entire societies to share values, identities, ideologies, often without questioning where they come from. It's safe, predictable, comfortable, until someone, like you, steps outside of it. And suddenly, everything feels unstable. You threaten the group illusion. You aren't buying into the performance. You're not pretending to agree just to belong. That subtle defiance, even if unspoken, ripples outward. It makes others nervous, not because you're attacking them, but because your authenticity highlights their mimicry. You see the gaps in their logic, the contradictions in their morality, the hollow applause for causes no one actually lives by. You notice how quick people are to follow trends, but how slow they are to examine them. You don't mock it, but you don't subscribe to it either. And that makes you unpredictable. In a world that rewards obedience disguised as virtue, the one who thinks critically is cast as dangerous. Even if you're peaceful, even if you're kind, your mind itself is the disruption, a living reminder that true consciousness requires solitude, and that freedom of thought, real freedom, can be deeply isolating. But you didn't come here to echo. You came to see, to question, to unravel. And while that may disturb the comfort of others, it's the only path that ever leads to something real. Question group norms. There's a frequency you carry, subtle but undeniable. It's not in your voice, or your clothes, or your posture. It's in your energy, your aura. And whether people believe in those things or not, they feel it, even if they can't explain why. Because you've done the inner work, the kind of work that requires solitude, self-confrontation, radical honesty. You've faced your shadows, held your grief, untangled your past. And the result isn't just peace, it's presence. A deep, regulated nervous system that doesn't react impulsively, doesn't project, doesn't beg for attention. You walk into a room, and it shifts. Not because you're loud, but because you're aligned. Your energy isn't chaotic, it's centered. And for people still ruled by emotional reactivity, that kind of stability is unnerving. Most people live in a state of inner turbulence. Always anxious, always overstimulated, always seeking the next distraction. Their nervous systems are wired for survival, not stillness. And when they meet someone who embodies calm, not as a performance, but as a byproduct of deep self-integration, it throws them off. They don't know how to categorize you. You're not playing the typical emotional games. You don't over-explain, you don't overshare, and you don't respond to manipulation with defensiveness. You respond with silence, or clarity, or nothing at all. And so they call you too intense, or too cold, or too sensitive. But what they're really saying is this: you don't operate like the rest of us. And that makes me uncomfortable. Carl Jung once suggested that wholeness, not perfection, is the goal of life. And wholeness requires coherence, a nervous system that has made peace with itself, that no longer leaks energy chasing validation, that sees through projection, that lives in truth, even when it's quiet. Your aura reflects that wholeness, and trauma-conditioned people who rely on emotional chaos to feel alive often experience your calm as a threat. You are not intense, you are simply clear. And in a world built on confusion and performance, clarity is both rare and deeply misunderstood. Emotional frequency. In a world that feeds on attachment, independence is often misunderstood, or worse, resented. We're taught from a young age that love means needing someone, that closeness means constant contact, that the absence of dependency is a lack of care. But what if that's a lie we've been sold to keep us emotionally entangled? What if needing nothing from someone is the purest form of connection? Your presence says something most people have never heard. I want connection, but I don't need your validation to exist. That message, silent but strong, destabilizes everything people have come to expect from relationships. Because most aren't seeking intimacy. They're seeking a mirror for their ego. They want reassurance, submission, emotional proof that they matter. And when they meet someone who doesn't offer that, not out of coldness, but out of self-containment, it feels like abandonment. But it's not abandonment, it's self-respect. Carl Jung described the process of becoming the self as the highest goal of individuation, the integration of all parts of the psyche into a coherent whole. Not someone perfect, but someone complete. When you reach that state, you stop clinging, you stop chasing, you stop trying to extract meaning from others because you've already found it within. This is threatening to people who equate attention with love and dependence with loyalty. They label your wholeness as arrogance, your detachment as superiority. But what they're really reacting to is the fact that your self-worth doesn't depend on their approval. You can walk away, not out of malice, but out of alignment, and that terrifies them more than hatred ever could. The individuated person becomes magnetic because they don't need anything. And in that absence of need, people project everything: desire, fear, admiration, resentment, because your emotional sovereignty is something they've never been taught to access in themselves. You're not intimidating because you're distant. You're intimidating because you're whole. And in a society that survives on codependency, wholeness is the final act of rebellion. Independence as threat. You were never feared because of your attitude. You were feared because of your energy. Because without saying a word, you reveal something others are trying to forget. You are the reflection they've avoided, the question they don't want to ask, the mirror they turn away from. You are not loud, but you are clear. And in a world that survives on noise and confusion, clarity is confrontation. Each of these signs, your silence, your insight, your independence, your depth, they all point to the same truth. You are awake in a world that is still asleep, and for many that is unbearable, because you represent something dangerous, not to the world itself, but to the illusions it depends on. You remind people that there is a truth beneath the noise, that there is life beyond distraction, that there is a self beyond the mask. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he never said it would be easy. Becoming who you truly are means you will be misunderstood. You will be rejected. And yes, you will be feared. But don't shrink. Don't dilute your frequency to make others comfortable. Don't pretend to be less so, you're more acceptable. Don't apologize for a presence that took years of pain, healing, and honesty to create. Your aura is not the problem. It's the proof that you've done what many are too afraid to do. So let them call you intimidating. Let them call you intense. Let them call you too much. Because maybe, just maybe, being too much is exactly what this sleeping world needs to finally wake up. If something in this resonated, not just in your mind but deep in your bones, then don't ignore it. The truth is, very few people are willing to face the discomfort of being fully awake in a world that wants them numb. But if you felt seen, if you felt understood, it means you're one of the rare ones. And you're not alone. This channel is a space for the misunderstood, for the psychologically awake, for the ones who have always felt too intense, too quiet, too different, and are starting to realize that was never a flaw. It was a sign. So if you're ready to keep peeling back the layers, confronting the hidden forces that shape us, and stepping fully into the energy they fear, then don't just leave. Subscribe, like, stay close, because we're not here to fit in. We're here to remember who we really are. And the more we awaken, the more we recognize each other.